Alrighty, so this is well, I call it "Let's get this flow started," but it's kind of like intro to a flow. Like, where do we go? How do we start a flow before we actually start a flow? Is kind of what I'm going for, because I've run across this issue multiple times with people, where basically they like, I think I need a flow, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do at that point. But before I do that, a quick intro to myself. I'm Jake Reschafer. I am a Salesforce MVP. I run the Milwaukee developer user group, and I also run Salesforce Saturday here in Milwaukee as well. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for just under 10 years. So if you have any other questions at the end of the session, by all means, we can talk about them as well. It sounds like about your intro to Salesforce and just learning the admin basics. So we can recap on some other topics at the end if we have some spare time. All right. So, like I said, this is let's get this flow started. So, quick run of hands. Who's seen the screen or been stuck here and didn't know what to do on this particular screen? And it sounds like a lot of you have never been written in a flow, so you may have never actually seen the screen before, which is fine, because if you've been stuck here, then you've probably also been stuck on, if you've selected one of those options, you've probably been stuck in this blank page, or you just sit there and look at start a screen flow, and you're like, or start a flow, and you're like, I have no idea what to do at this point. So what my goal today is to help alleviate some of that blank screen flow syndrome that a lot of people have by basically laying out some beginning stepping stones to get you started before you actually get started. So if you've ever started a flow, it can be intimidating. You have all those possible options of all the things you can do just sitting there waiting for you. But before you start, here are some of the few things that I want you to think about beforehand. The first thing is documentation. So if we've come to the point where we figured out we needed a flow, hopefully we have some type of documentation that has led us to that decision. After we have that documentation, hopefully we need to figure out what kind of flow we need to set up, and then we also need to identify what needs to happen in that flow. So the first step here is we want to map out the process, and there's the process, and then there's where does this flow fit into the process. So overall, most businesses, there's a whole slew of things going on, and if you're creating a flow, it may encompass the whole entire process, it may encompass just a small portion of the process, but where does flow fit into the process? So this is part of that documentation effort here. We want to know where does this flow fit into everything. So if we're on an account and we want to be able to say, hey, we want to update certain fields, we want to update certain fields in a flow. How do we go about doing that? So where does that fit into everything? So we want to make sure we have some type of process documentation. And this might be a simple lucid chart that you create on your own, and you just kind of say, and this fits here, and this needs to do X, Y, Z. So we've identified some of the things that we need to do. We don't necessarily know how we have to do them, but we know that, in my previous example, that the flow needed to update some fields in the account. So we know that it has to do an update. We have identified the object as an account. So we have some basic information there on what we need that flow to be able to do. The next portion here is basically identifying what needs to happen. So what's going to trigger or start this flow? So in that process, where does this flow fit, and how is it going to be triggered? Is it going to be an automation? Is there some type of other criteria that needs to trigger it? Is it going to be a button that we have to click? Is it just going to be on a page layout? What's going to basically trigger this flow in order to get it to fire? Also, yes, sure. You're muted, I think. Yeah. Sure, you're muted, so you have to unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Sherry. I'm new here. I don't know about anybody else, but it seems like there's some feedback going on.
All right. Let me hop into another room. Give me 1 second here. All right. Are you able to see my screen again, or which one are you seeing?
You see like a window of like 8 screens inside of one another.
All right. Let me stop and
Yeah, Inception. Yeah.
yeah.
But I think we lost the we fixed the feedback.
Yeah, my parakeets are really excited to be up this morning. That's what that was. All right, cool. So,
Birds.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I thought those were birds.
Yeah. All right. So, for when it comes to documentation, like I said before, basically we need to figure out what's going to trigger this flow. So it can be a button, and hopefully in the process documentation we've identified how we're going to interact with that flow. So that's what's going to trigger it. We also need to identify what objects are needed. So not only what's going to trigger, what objects are we going to trigger this from, what objects are we going to be interacting with. So are we going to be interacting with the account, contact, case, opportunity, any of those types of objects, and also what records are needed. So are we going to be creating records? Are we going to be updating records? Are we going to be querying for information and then taking that information and then putting it in another area? So what information do we need? Once we have a lot of that basic information, we can now start making educated decisions on what we need to do in our flow. So there's more than 4 types of flows, but we're going to talk about these 4 types because these are the most commonly used, and that's the screen, the record trigger, the schedule, and the auto launch. And the auto launch is a non-triggered flow, which something else has to trigger that. So the first type of screen flow is a graphical representation. So basically, it typically guides users through a business process that is launched, typically from a landing page or Experience Cloud site, something like those, or quick action. This is where the end user interacts with that particular flow. And we're actually going to create one of these later today. This is becoming a common type of flow that gets created. But yeah, this is where a user is going to interact with it. So if anytime you see somebody said that we need to interact with the flow and do X, Y, Z, that type of thing, and the user has to select things, we should be thinking screen flow. A record trigger flow. This is, if you're familiar with workflow rules or process builders, this is where you set some type of criteria, and then that criteria then launches set flow. And with that flow, we can do things like create, update, and delete. When you set the criteria, it's going to be criteria based, so it's going to be based on the record and also the object. And sure, do you have another question? Okay. I think it's your hand raised from before. I just wanted to make sure that you didn't have another question. Cool. So we have our record trigger flows here. And by the way, if you have any other questions, anyone, just speak up and interrupt me because I'm not completely watching the hand raising function. So we have our record trigger flows. Then, hold on. Our next one here we have is our scheduled trigger flows. And with scheduled trigger flows, these are basically here to it's very similar to the record trigger flow, but it's done on a schedule. So we're going to say at a set time and a frequency, we want to launch this flow to do things. So we still have the criteria. We still can do create, updates, and deletes. We can specify the object, but now we have time based. So we can say we want to do this daily starting on February 1st, or we can say we want to do this whatever time frequency we want. We can set that up, and then based on the criteria we set, those are the records that it's going to go find to then go update those update. It's going to run the flow based on the updates that it finds from those records that you've queried for in your criteria. And then the last one here is your AutoLaunch Flow. This is the no triggered flow. Basically, it's there to do all the fun. It can do everything you want. It can be create. It can create records, update records, delete records, but there's no triggering for this flow. So you have to have something else call this flow. Typically, that's done with either Apex. You can call a flow with a process builder. You can also call a flow with another flow. So these are real cool little flows that are able to be done if you want to put them in some other process. But we're going to use something else to set the criteria before launching this flow.
Jake, I'm sorry, like I said, I'm new to this. I don't know what is Apex and REST API.
So Apex, that's the Salesforce's internal coding language that they developed. The REST API is it's how you typically send information from one source to another source. So if you had an integration, you'd use the REST API most likely in some of those scenarios.
Thank you.
Yep. For most beginning admins, they don't worry about Apex and REST APIs unless they have an integration or they have a more senior person helping out with those things. For most AutoLaunch flows that I've seen, they either are used in the process builder or they're used by another flow. But I am more commonly seeing Apex call flows. All right. So I'm going to take a quick second here, a break here, to think about everything we've talked about so far. So before we get started, we should have some type of documentation of what the flow should look like. And then we've also learned about the different types of flows. So depending on the information that we gathered from our documentation, we should be able to make an educated guess on the type of flow that we should use to start off with. So I'm going to take a couple look at examples. The first example I have here is for a screen flow. And that is, as a service representative, I need a set script. As a representative, I need to be able to ask questions, and based on those responses, ask other questions and make a case at the end. So some of the key things here that we want to think about here is that this is a great screen flow because we need a set script. So we're going to present information to the user, and then based on the information that is being presented, we can then ask additional questions. So that may look something a little bit like this. So we start a flow, we have our first question, then make a decision based on that initial question, and then we can do another screen, or we can do a screen and a screen. And then after all this is done, we could then go ahead and create a case. So this is just kind of a quick, so Subflow would be like if I want to then, in this area, we had another flow. So Subflow is a flow that we created that we call from another flow.
So at the end of this flow, you'd basically create a case record.
Yeah, that'd be my goal. At the end of this here, I have like a little create record that would create the case based on everything. The next example I have here is a record trigger flow. So basically, when a new account is created, I need to check for other accounts that may match that name, phone, or website. I know this is kind of duplicate if you have duplication turned on for duplication rules. But essentially what we can do is we can create a flow that runs on creation, and then it can take, we can look for criteria that says, hey, the name, phone, or website may match, and then it can go ahead and create maybe a notification to that end user saying, hey, so you know that account already exists. So it doesn't prevent them from doing anything, but it notifies them that maybe another account doesn't match the criteria of the account that they just created. Another one here, the scheduled trigger flow. Maybe you can see there's a start date, the start time, the frequency, but maybe we need to check contracts closing the next month daily to make a new renewal opportunity. So we can create a flow, a scheduled flow here that will go out and look at every day at the contracts that are going to be closing that day and closing a month from now, and then we can go create a renewal opportunity for those. So this is how we started, and then we just go through the process of creating the flow to do those actions after the fact. And then the last scheme here is AutoLaunch Flow. So I need to find all contacts associated with the account that's being passed to it and update their accounts, the status of the contacts. So what we can do is we can create a variable called record ID, as you can see here, and we can pass the account ID into this flow, and then you can go do all those updates in a flow outside of that. Any questions on any of those examples? All right. So we're gonna do a little bit of building together today. So I need a visual way to update accounting information for an account, and to be able to update terms, accounting type, and a billing contact. So these are all text fields on the account. So I've already created these fields on the account, but we just want a quick way to update this information, not using the standard details of the page. We're going to build probably we're gonna put this flow most likely on a page, and then we can conditionally show it if we need be for like the accounting team. So first off, what type of flow does everyone think this should be?
Screen flow.
Screen flow, yep. What object do you think might be like? What object do you think we're gonna be working with here?
The account.
Yeah. All right. So what do we know? We know it's a screen flow. We know we're going to do an object. The object is account. We're doing an update on account as well. We're not doing any creation of records, so we don't have to worry about that. We will need a way to pass a variable from the flow to the flow from the account. Does anyone have any idea on how we do that? It's cool. What we'll have to do is we're going to have to create a variable called record ID, and that'll be the first step we do in our flow here. And we're going to create that ID to be able to accept input from outside of the source, so that we can pass a value to it. And then the last thing we want to do is how we get this. How would we get this flow on the account page? We're going to add it as a lightning page flow component. So we're going to do all these things live in a minute here. So we're going to go ahead and create a flow, and then we're going to add it to the account page. And I'm going to show you some tips and strategies there, things that I like to do.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What do you typically do for documenting before you create a flow? What does that typically look like?
Typically what I would do is I would kind of write out something similar to like what I have here, maybe another sentence, kind of writing down the use case. Then I would probably use some type of tool, use a chart to kind of map out what needs to happen during that flow. Because then that kind of translates pretty well to what our flow needs to do. So I would have like a little paragraph of what needs to happen, and then I would build a lucid chart that kind of matches what you need to do. So imagine this was a lucid chart. Like, okay, this is my start point, and then my first question, and I made this question. Then I'm like, okay, based on the information, it's going to look a lot like the flow, but it's going to tell me like what are the different things that need to happen during that process. And this part right here can vary, so that just might be written in words and text that you just write down. Like, then after this decided, then we need to do X, Y, Z, and then if else, that type of thing. I found that creating flows like this also tend to allow your creating like a documentation of what a lucid chart may look like beforehand, or like a process flow before creating a flow also will help you drastically when creating a flow, because you're going to have a lot of those steps laid out of what needs to happen. So like we can do queries and things like that in the flow, and we're not doing those today. But we can do things where in a lucid chart, let's say like go find accounts, but in the flow, that's a bigger step that we have to do, that type of thing. So getting the basics laid out is typically what I recommend. So having it written out what you need to happen, and then doing a simple pass-through, kind of like laying out the objects and the other different steps that need to happen. Like in a lucid chart tool is what I would recommend before starting a flow.
Nice. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to go over here to here, and we're going to click New Flow. And we're going to do a screen flow because we've already identified that that's the type of flow that we need. And I'll do auto layout because this is probably the more, this is becoming a little bit more common for people to use. And the first thing we want to do is we want to tackle that variable that I talked about, that record ID. So we need a way to be able to pass the account ID into this flow. And basically that just, this is a way so we know how to update this particular flow with, where we know how to update this way, this flow knows which record to update. So the first thing.
Would that only be possible if you're on the account record page?
So you could put this flow on any page if you want, but if we're gonna, or as you'll see, we're gonna do some additional steps in this flow. If you give it the wrong ID, it's gonna come back with errors.
Okay, so if you're on the account record page, it would grab the ID automatically.
Well, when I go to that page, I'll show you how you set
Oh,
up.
okay. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
No worries. It's a big step that a lot of people miss, but a lot of people are very interested in. So I'm gonna go create this as my variable called record ID. I'm just gonna select it as text because that's all that I need for this. And this is one of the things I was talking about before. When we set this variable here, we need to be able to pass a value in from that account. So I'm going to say that this variable is available for input. This just means that when we're on our landing page component, that this is going to be an available resource that we can pass the account ID to. Okay. So we have our account. We have our variable done. One of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do a query for that current account, because what I want to do is in my screen flow, I want to set some default values for all those for the 3 fields that I've selected. So I'm going to do a get records. And what this means is I'm going to go find the account that matches that ID that I passed to my variable. So I'm going to just call this find account. And for the object, we're going to select account because that's the object that makes sense. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to select ID, and I'm going to have it equal my variable, which is record ID. So this is telling us that we're going to go look on the account object. Do I need to make this bigger for anyone?
Yes, please. I'm on an iPad, so it's hard to see. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, cool. So what this is stating here is that we are going to go find accounts, and we've specified that the account object is here. And we're giving it some criteria here, which is basically the ID of that account needs to equal that record ID. That record ID is going to be the ID of the account that we're going to pass through it when we set up our flow on our screen. So right now, it doesn't make a lot of sense because we don't have that front part working to pass information through here. But at the end here, we'll put all the pieces together and we can see how everything works. So we have our ID equals this, and then we don't have to worry about sorting the accounts because we're only going to return the first record, because as we all know, every Salesforce record should only have one ID. And if we have only one ID, then we should only be returning one result. So we're going to leave that as is. And we're going to automatically store the fields that we want to use. Salesforce, this is what we should pretty much be doing from going forth, unless there's actual criteria where we need to do some assignments of things. But Salesforce is smart enough to know that later on that I'm going to be using 3 fields from that. So those are only the fields that's going to query. So I always recommend using automatically store fields, because that's what's recommended by Salesforce, and it makes your life easier too, because now you don't have a bunch of other variables you have to manage. All right, so now that we have our query, and now I gotta find my flow. Here it is. So we are at the start of the screen. We have our get record. So this is just behind the scenes. The end user doesn't see you doing the query. Right now, if we were to run this flow, we won't see anything happening because there's no input, there's no screens set up for the end user. So then our next step here is we're gonna go ahead and add a screen. I'm gonna call this accounting info. So every screen needs to have a property here, a label. And then on the left here, I'm actually gonna reduce the size just a tad because it's a little bit hard for me to operate like this. So in we got our full label, county and phone information. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and bring some text boxes onto our screen here. So we need 3 fields, and just gonna move 3 on. And what we're gonna do here, so for the accounting tab, we had those 3 fields that we identified that we wanted to put on here. So the first one, I believe, was the first one is terms. So I'm going to call this one terms. All right, and the next one was, you think I can remember this by now, accounting type and billing type. All right, so. Accounting type and then billing content. you notice as I go through here that it's creating custom API names for every single thing. This is so we can actually reference all these later on in our flow and if we need to. So right now, all this is doing is that this is just going to present the screen. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and give this a save. I'll call it accounting flow 2, because actually I already have accounting flow 1. So if we want, we can actually see what's going on here. We can put this debug log here. I'm going to go over here and grab. So if you've never been in Salesforce, the ID of the record's always going to be right here in the URL. So this is the ID of this account. I'm just going to copy it because I'm going to need it in my flow here. Because what we're going to do is we're going to run a little debug session so we can kind of see what's happening first. So I'm going to give it my debug session. I'm going to give it the ID of that record right there and click run. And you can see it's got my terms and the kind of information. So this is how it's going to be presented to the end user. But if I type anything in here and type stuff in here, right now, and I click finish, nothing happens. It doesn't update the account, it doesn't do anything like that. We actually haven't done any of those steps yet. So one of my first things, and the next thing I want to do here is in my, what we'll do is first we'll go ahead and create the update records. And just like how we did that find records that before, we're going to call this update account. And we're going to specify conditions on this one. And what we're going to do is say we're going to update the account, and we're going to say the ID matches that record ID again, because we know that the this variable record ID here is that ID for the account, so we don't have to do anything fancy. Since we already know that that's what's going there, we're not deviating away from the account, so we can stay here on the account.
Can you explain why you need to have a condition or what that means for the ID equaling the record ID?
So in this scenario, the reason why we're doing that is because I'm telling the flow to go update a record. If I didn't specify the ID, it wouldn't know what record to update.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then what I'm going to do is, so this is telling me the record that I need to update, and then this down here is going to tell me the fields I need to use in order to update that record. So terms, and then I need to add two other ones, which were accounting type, and then I also need billing contact. What I can do now is enter the values from, so usually we have our context, we have a single variable. So that from those values, those fields that we created in the screen components, we can actually say that the value you type in that terms is going to be the value for the terms. And same thing here for the accounting type, we're going to grab the accounting type. And then for the last one, we'll grab the billing contact. So what this is telling us is that we're going to update, too far. We're going to update the record that started this whole entire process. And we're going to update the terms with the value from the terms that you type in the terms box. We're going to update the accounting type with the values that we enter in the accounting type. And we're also going to update the billing contact with the values that we type. We'll go ahead and click done. So right now, our flow will find the account that we're launching from. We will then do a screen to present those fields that we want to fill in, and then the values that they put in the screen will then update the account. So this is a great, I'm going to hit save, and you can actually see what's happening here. We'll do another debug here, and we can kind of, so that debug functionality is a great tool to kind of see how things are going to look and operate. So now we can type in terms, and we can do all this fun stuff, and we hit next, and we can actually watch it happen here on the right here and the right. So it's updating the record. It's like, yep, the volume is updating with all the garbage group that I wrote in there. So it's now updated that record. And if I actually go over to Ursa Major and refresh this tab, we should see all those updates happen. Look down here. So you can see we have terms, we have all that stuff that we just put in there. So right now, this flow looks great. Now, if I debug this again and I run it, you can see that none of the values that I typed beforehand are populating here, right? So like, and most people, they want to know what's the value beforehand before they update it, because we don't want to inadvertently update fields that maybe don't need to be updated. So what we should do is pull in those preset values. What we can do now, we can hop back over to our screen flow here. I'm going to go ahead and edit it. And then for our terms here, we're going to set a default value. And what we can do is, remember that the find accounts variable that we set up beforehand, we can actually reference that and then type in terms. So now when we run this flow, the terms that are currently on that account will populate here. And we do the same thing for accounting type by going to that find there and then type in type. And then the last one is building contact. What did I do here? All right. Go ahead and done. Make sure always, whenever you hit, before you hit debug, make sure this save is able to be clicked. We're not going to be running that debug in the most current version, so make sure you hit save before you hit debug. Otherwise, you won't get that update that I think I just did there. So now you can see straight out, so it means that if you hit debug, it's going to show whatever you have currently on the page here. We'll do debug one more time, and then when I do this one, it should pull in those values that we just typed in before. Now, if I want to, I could change the current type and put 1, 2, 3 at the end. If I click next, one of the cool things about this flow now, if I hit run again, it's got 1, 2, 3 in there. So it's going to be every time you update, it's going to update these values correctly as well. All right. So does this flow look good to everyone? Does this look like something we could put on a screen flow? I mean, a page layout. Well, let me tell you it is. So go ahead and click activate, which makes this an available flow to use later on. And now that we have our flow built and ready to go, we need to add it to the page layout. And what we can do is we're going to hop on back over to that Ursa Major. So currently we have the values and our details, but maybe we want to clear a section to find that information. What we can do is we can hop on over to our little view here, click edit page, and this is going to take us to the edit of the Lightning page. Once we're here, we can see that this is how the Lightning page is laid out. So you can see all our different sections. We have our tabs. We have our section here. And then what we can do is we can add the flow component from the left side here. So this flow component, you can put it anywhere you want it. So we can put it in any section you want. I'm actually going to create a new tab for this information because I want to create a tab that's just for the accounting team. And I'm going to make it custom. I'm going to just call this accounting info. All right. Click done. So now I've added a new tab here. I select this tab. You can see there's no components in here, but I can take my flow component, dragging it over here. And right now it's using one of my other flows that I created called Accounting Flow 1. I'm actually going to select the Accounting Flow 2 because that's the one that we just created. And then down here, we can see that record ID. Remember that's that variable that we created before. I'm going to say pass the record ID to this variable, which is going to basically say that variable that we created, we're going to pass the current record ID, the current account ID to that variable so that that flow can use that ID and that variable. Yeah, so the flow can use that variable and that ID. All right, so we're all good on this front here. We can hit save. All right, and then we just go back. And then if we go here and click on the accounting info tab, we can see it's got the current information there, and now we can just type in anything else we want in there. Click next. And the next cool thing about this is it's always going to refresh for your device, so you're always going to have the most current information. So it's kind of like another extra little dynamic screen page that you can put on there. So if you want to separate information out from your details, you can put it on in a flow here and do this type of information and have types of stuff in there. So we can keep it updated so as much as you want. and then it just keeps doing. I'll do the update, and then it just refreshes that page and displays information that you have. So that's a quick way that we were able to create a screen flow, and then put it on the page layout and utilize it. So we've all now created a screen flow for the account here for the accounting information. Any questions on what we did in that process? Any questions overall on the presentation? Yes, sure. You're muted, I think, still.
Sorry. It shows here that you're recording this,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know about anybody else, but the sound is coming in a little garbled. Where is the recording going to be available for us to review for the future?
It's going to be on my YouTube channel.
Okay. I don't know what your YouTube channel is, so do you mind sharing that?
Yep. Just give me 1 second here. All right, so this is my channel. It's called S-Force Dark Knight. And it's doing the wrong screen again. Yeah, there we go. So this is the channel here. I can post the link here. I'm not able to customize my domain yet because I'm not enough followers.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I have other ones. Like I said, I run a developer YouTuber too, so we have other things in there as well. So I put all of the videos I record. I don't record all sessions because sometimes they don't make sense to record. But this one, I figured it makes sense to record. So any other questions?
No, I just want to say thanks for doing this and showing the process. Seeing it from start to finish really helps. So I appreciate you going through this, Jake.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks.
Yeah, the same. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake.
Where's the best place to go to like learn more about this? Like Trailhead is probably like the best way to do it, or
so if you actually want real life example, like if you want examples, Trailhead's gonna be your best option for that type of stuff. There's not a lot of other platforms you can do those types of things. Trailhead, I mean, you have your access to the playground, so you can actually build things. I will say that their stuff is limited, so trying to think of different types of scenarios where you can automate things is another way, and then trying to automate them, like especially like in a sandbox or a playground. Like I kind of said before, when it comes to when we go to that documentation, sometimes flows aren't needed. So flows are a common tool that gets utilized a lot, but they may not always be the best tool for the job. So depending on your needs and requests and asks, it may not be the best tool for you to use at the time. Maybe there may be a different tool, but getting more practice, Trailhead's gonna be the best option, and then just trying to work through your own internal business processes that you may need to adjust. That's another good practice. I always recommend that if you're not a current system administrator and you're looking for work, find a local nonprofit that's using Salesforce, and then volunteer, and then you can get countless hours of experience helping them out doing types of things that they need. To answer your question, Steve, any other?
No, that's good.
Cool. Any other questions? If not, thanks for coming, and I'll give everyone 15 minutes back of their day.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.